they'll probably all come to Houston, and then they'll destroy us. Yeah, I know. It's a mixed blessing. Oh my gosh. This is great. They need more people than there were yesterday.
Yes, sir. So this is Rhetoric School. Rhetoric School. This is Dr. Markos. We're very blessed to have him here today. You've probably read some of his books. I know you had them in Dr. Pierce's class, right?
So, which one do you use? Oh, you used, that was fairly recent. That's only 2 years ago. Okay. Oh, great. We get into that. Well, again, those of you that have read Atheism on Trial, now, I didn't come up with that title. That's a really cool title. Okay, when you write books, the publisher changes titles all the time. Here's something that you'll appreciate. This is actually a true story. Okay, some of you have seen my book, From Achilles to Christ, Why Christians Should Read the Pagan Classics. Well, the original title of that was From Homer to Christ. Right? Oh, that didn't know. From Homer to Christ. And like 6 months before the book's about to be published, I get a call from the publisher. They're saying, "No, we've decided we can't call your book From Homer to Christ." Now, does anybody want to guess why they decided they couldn't go with that title? Hey, somebody got it, because most Americans, when they hear Homer, think of The Simpsons, and people would have thought my book was about Christianity and popular culture. So, it's actually a better title, but the reason I wrote From Achilles to Christ is so someday someone else can write a book called From Homer to Christ, and people will know who Homer is. And there actually is a book out there, by the way, called The Gospel According to The Simpsons. Okay? But the original title of Atheism on Trial is they let me use it as the title of my introduction is Nothing New Under the Sun. Right? Nothing New Under the Sun is, who said that? Where does that come from? Nothing new under the sun. Come on. So is it? I think I heard Solomon. What? Ecclesiastes, right? You read Ecclesiastes, okay? There's nothing new under the sun. Of course, a Greek or Roman would have said there's nothing new under the... I just wonder if anybody's learned the medieval cosmological model here. They would have said nothing new under the moon, okay? If you've learned that, they used to believe that the moon was the threshold. Everything under the moon was continually changing. Everything above the moon was perfect, right? But Solomon said nothing new under the sun. And the reason I wrote that book, and it really goes along with why a classical Christian education is so important. All of the stuff that the new atheists have been saying, you probably heard some of the names, Richard Dawkins, the late Christopher Hitchens, Sam Harris, there's a bunch of Daniel Dennett, a lot of them. In fact, they call those four the four horsemen, like in the apocalypse. Okay? And the trouble with the new atheists is when you read them, and this will happen, by the way, if you go to secular school, when you read them or when you hear professors talk, they will dismiss Christian ideas, but they will suggest, they won't say it, but they'll suggest that their atheism, or at least their secularism, is based on new discoveries in science or history or anthropology, etc., etc., etc. The reason I wrote that book is that that is simply not true. The arguments they're making against God and Christianity and just against miracles, all of those things, they have been around for thousands of years. That's why it's called Nothing New Under the Sun. It's really more of a historical book to show that all the arguments the new atheists are making have been made by Epicureans and Stoics, by pre-Socratic philosophers, by Gnostic heretics. I mean, they've been around forever, and they've been answered forever. And here's the great part about the classical Christian education. A lot of their arguments were answered by Christian theologians like Augustine or Aquinas. But actually, a lot of their arguments were answered by the higher pagans like Plato and Aristotle and Cicero. Right? But because we don't know our history, because we don't read the great books, as many of your, when you go to college, many of your colleagues that came out of a regular public school have not read the books you've read, and they don't know the history. They're stuck in a little contemporary box. And when a new atheist says this is based on new evidence, they believe them. Or, sorry to say, if you go to a seminary that's just kind of given up on biblical authority, they make these incredible claims about the Gospels. And they make you think that their arguments are based on all of this new evidence. But it's not. All they have are the Gospels you're reading. Now, maybe they know Greek and you don't, okay? But other than that, it's often not based on anything. But again, I went to classes like that. They really make you feel like they've got access to something that proves their point, but they don't, okay? The arguments have been around forever, and they've been answered forever. And one of the reasons why the education you're getting here is going to prepare you better for a university is because you have read the great books. You've been part of the dialogue. And, in the old days, maybe if you had gone to a very traditional Christian school, you would have known the Bible well, but you might not have known the pagan books, right? The pre-Christian books that we're reading. But not anymore. In fact, God has a sense of humor. Have any of you heard of a book called How the Irish Saved Civilization? By a guy named Thomas Cahill. Anyway, really great story. And in this book, he showed that a lot of the pagan classics were preserved by Irish monks living in the middle of nowhere. So God chose the least likely people imaginable to save the pagan classics. And folks, God has a sense of humor. Now, it does say Jesus wept, but nowhere in the Bible does it actually say Jesus laughed. You can read a book called The Name of the Rose, but nowhere does it say Jesus laughed. But I believe God has a sense of humor, because right now, he is saving the pagan classics again by the least likely people, conservative homeschoolers, okay? When I was your age, those conservative, they were like Bible-only people. No, we only have the Bible in it, nothing else, right? God forbid they let you read Harry Potter or something like that. So, it's really funny how we attack Harry Potter, which is basically based on a Judeo-Christian view. I mean, you can decide what you think about the magic, but the basic philosophy is based on Judeo-Christian principles of what is good and what is evil, etc. But we let slip right past us something called His Dark Materials, which is well written and all, but it's actually specifically anti-C.S. Lewis and anti-Christian, particularly anti-Catholic. And we just let that slip through. We didn't even notice. So we're crazy. Okay? But we're learning, and we're learning quickly. And we are preserving, right? So you can think of yourselves as Bilbo and Frodo Baggins, because Middle-earth was saved by the least likely person imaginable, right? Well, you are the ones God is using, and guess what? Here's God's sense of humor. At the very moment that you all are preserving and learning and passing on the pagan classics, the so-called Ivy Leagues are throwing them out at the very same time. And so be excited. You really are preserving these things. And why is it important to preserve them? Well, it's important because it's part of human history, but it's particularly important in our culture because America was founded on a dialogue with the Greco-Roman and Judeo-Christian books. And the best place to learn that, have you all read the Federalist Papers in any of your classes, or some of them? Okay, that's a good place to really see. And if you ever get a chance to go back and read them all, okay, some of them are a little bit dull, but it's important because if you read them all, you will see that those writers, including that rapper guy, you got that okay? You will see, I watched it on Disney, and I was finding I could actually understand what they said most of the time, which kind of scared me, actually. I actually understand most of what they said. Anyway, if you read it carefully, the Federalist paper not only quotes and points towards the ancient Greeks, the Athenian democracy, the Roman Republic, but they talk about the Carthaginian Republic. They talk about all these different leagues, like the Delian League and the Corinthian League, all of which were defeated by the Romans. But they also talk about things that happened in the Middle Ages. They talk about Venice, and that's one of the first republics in the very early Renaissance period, was the Venetian Republic. So they really, really studied and dialogue and try to avoid their mistakes, but imitate their successes. So our founding fathers is one of the few times in history when someone actually learned from history. You've heard that old adage that if you don't learn history, you'll be doomed to repeat it. And that's what normally happens again and again. But not here. We actually learned. And they built a document that the crazy people still haven't been able to destroy. Now, they're working very hard at it these days, okay? They still haven't been able to destroy the Constitution because they really knew what they were doing. And in making that, they not only understood, what is good and what is true and what is beautiful, they also understood the nature of human beings. They understood that we were made in God's image, that we are good, that we have intrinsic worth and value, that we can't be put into groups or, turned into cogs in a wheel. But at the same time, they understood that we are fallen and depraved. Do any of you know? None of the teachers actually got this yesterday, but maybe they just didn't want to yell out. But the reason the Federalist paper says we need checks and balances is because men are not what? Close, but it's a shape. They use a different phrase, a very famous phrase. No? So what is it? It's men are not angels. You heard that phrase? Okay? And that's a understanding and an acceptance of the fact that, even if you're not a Christian, I think it's pretty obvious that we are capable of incredible good and self-sacrifice, and that's a fancy word for self-sacrifice, altruism, you heard that word? We're capable of such great altruism and self-sacrifice, but at the same time, we're capable not just of incredible evil, but of tiny little pettiness and envy and resentment, okay? So you can be wonderful and giving, and you can also be the mean girls, The mean girls are scary. You all got to be pretty good actresses, though. Okay? I think one of them went crazy, but the other ones were pretty good. But so understand that what you're learning in wrestling with these great books, you are learning skills. This is what's wonderful, okay? This is a liberal arts classical school. It's not a vocational school where they're teaching you specific skills. But by going through the curriculum that you've been going through all these years, by wrestling with these great books, by discussing them, you are actually learning skills. This is good. You're learning the skills as you go along. And one of the skills that you're learning, I just got a chance to speak just for 5 minutes in the logic school. Are you glad you're done with that? Are you glad you're done with adolescence? Would you just like to leave that, just pretend like it never happened? I'm going to make a fortune because I'm going to create the adolescent box. And if you're a parent, when the kid reaches adolescent, you put them in this box that freezes them, but they continue to grow, and then you take them out when they're 18. Would some of you like to go in that box? You might have actually enjoyed going in that box when you were logic school or something. My daughter teaches middle school, logic music, and she sometimes deals with those kids. But my daughter's also 5'1", so it gives her a chance to be taller than most of the kids, but not all of them. There we go. By the way, what is the deal with all those cars out there? You guys are all driving. Is it safe? No, that's not safe. Okay. These are all high school students. Right? So, one of the things that you're learning is to think logically. And what that means is you are learning something that is really not being taught anymore, certainly not encouraged. You are learning how to look at an argument and figure out what the assumptions are that underlie that argument. Now, it's only been fairly recently that we've been using the word worldview. When I was your age, we were using the word paradigm, but it doesn't make a difference. Classical education has always understood that our arguments are underwritten by certain givens. Like when you take math, right? When we do a math thing, it says, given that this equals this. Okay, well, in the moral sphere, we also base our decisions and our arguments on certain givens. Now, one of the givens that has underlied traditional culture until now is this idea that we are made in God's image and therefore have intrinsic value and worth, but we're fallen and depraved, and therefore we need rules. We need to have virtue instilled in us, and we need a sort of safety net to prevent us from sort of societal suicide. Okay? We've understood that. That's why a traditional culture is always a law and order culture. Now, if it goes insane, you have a police state. But a real traditional culture doesn't need a police state because it uses parenting, education and the churches to instill these virtues in you, so we don't need to have a police state. As soon as we lose that, as soon as we cease to be virtuous, morally self-regulating citizens, we will end up needing a police state. Whether it's from the right or the left, it's going to be a police state. So, you all are going to be salt and light in this world, not only by the knowledge you have, but by the ability to regulate yourself morally. Now, of course, this is a Christian school. I'm not saying we can save ourselves. I mean, we're still sinners, okay? But we can live in cooperation with other people, okay? We can follow the Sermon on the Mount. We're not going to follow it perfectly, okay? If we did, we wouldn't need Jesus to die for us, okay? But we can still be morally self-regulating people. And this is why a liberal arts education, the word liberal, like the word liberate, means to free you. It is freeing you to live in community, to think critically, to be, to contemplate, to meditate, to be creative. All of the skills you're learning here are freeing you to be fuller, richer people. Maybe not in terms of money, okay, but fuller people understanding who you are and why you're here, what your purpose is, and what the nature of the good, the true, and the beautiful is, and what is the nature of the good man, and the good state, and the good life. You're studying all of these things, and you may be learning that without even realizing you're learning it. Because as long as you're reading these books and discussing them, and also learning to write and think and argue, this is rhetoric school. How many of you are still terrified about speaking in front of a group? Not too many. See, that's pretty good, because most of your peers at other schools are still terrified. Okay, but you're learning to do it. You're learning to come forward, maintain eye contact, talk to people, all that sort of stuff. And that's really an important skill, right? You don't look at your feet. Okay? Can't understand. Now we have an answer. You really understand it, okay? By the way, I just saw a thing this morning that the CDC now said that students, that we go to 3 feet rather than 6 feet. This is not a joke. Did you see it? It's pretty good. Now, this is more like 3 inches, okay? But anyway, that's okay. You're cohorts. Are you cohorts? You all go together? Yeah, you're cohorts. So it's good stuff. But anyway, the handshake is going to be gone, okay? Do you all remember, you guys, wait a minute, were you? 1991. No, you weren't actually, were you born when The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe came out? The movie? That was like 2003 or something? Can't remember, so you might have just been born when it came out. Most of you have seen it. There's a really cute scene where Lucy meets Mr. Thomas, and she reaches out her hand, or is it Mr. B? And she reaches out her hand to shake his hand and goes, what am I supposed to do? You're supposed to shake. He says, why? She goes, I have no idea. Okay, well, your children will have no idea. What is that weird archaic thing? What are people doing? I don't understand. Are they supposed to do this? I don't know. Tough audience. Okay. Anyway, so one of the things, how many of you, now that you're in rhetoric school, how many of you have experienced what's called an aha moment? You ever heard of that? What's an aha moment? Can you define that? Oh my gosh. Okay. What is it? Somebody can explain what an aha moment is? Oh, good. It's a revelation. And usually that's another beautiful word is epiphany. Usually what brings about that revelation or epiphany? When you discover what? What do you discover? Say it again? Exactly. It's a connection. You're discovering suddenly two subjects that you're studying here that would seem to have nothing whatsoever in common. Suddenly you realize, oh my gosh, there's a connection there. And that's what sets off the light bulb. I told the guys yesterday that's how I lost my hair, because of all those light bulb moments burning all the way. And it's got a full head of hair, so watch out. We're all do classical education. It's worth it. But what you're doing is you're starting to realize that knowledge is unified. Most of you have studied a little bit of Plato, and Plato wants to talk about how all the virtues go together, right? How they're unified. And what you're doing with this kind of an education, that is the big word, interdisciplinary, right? Discipline used this way doesn't mean hitting with a stick. It means the different disciplines or majors that we study. And interdisciplinary means that we want to see the connections between history and literature and philosophy and art and music and math and science. And you're doing that, aren't you? When you're taking your class where you're looking for connections, theology we throw in there, there's a real joy there. Right? And I hope you're going to carry that joy of learning into your college education, because that joy will keep you going. And notice how much your teachers feel and experience that joy. Right? They want to be here. They want to learn. You need to keep that, and it will be contagious. And you may be able to sort of witness to friends you have in college that are not Christian or not interested. You might be able to witness to them not by specifically going through the gospel, but just by showing them that you have a joy in knowledge, that you believe it's good to learn and to grow and to become the person you were created to be, that you really believe you were born with a purpose that you need to fulfill. Again, a lot of people your age have lost that, okay? Do you know that one of the names for your generation is the anxious generation? Do you feel that anxiety? Maybe a little bit less, okay? A lot of people think it's partly because of the smartphone, because you know every bad thing that's going on in the world all at the same time. And of course you can't do anything about almost any of it, right? Anxious. In fact, I've seen statistics that say that the average level of anxiety, like 18, 19, 20-year-olds, that average level of anxiety would have put you in an institution in the 1950s, okay? That much anxiety. That's difficult to deal with. But one of the ways to deal with anxiety is to see the bigger picture. So many people in our culture now are literally trapped in a little contemporary box, and they don't know anything outside of that box. No wonder they're anxious, right? But you studied the rise and fall of Athens and Rome. Rome lasted like 1,000 years. And even when it fell, it was one of the most important places of the Renaissance and stuff like that. But you've seen things rise and fall and go up and down. And that should give you a wider perspective so you're not stuck and anxious in this little world. That you understand, we fought this. Well, first of all, if you take any class about the Great Death, the Black Death, you really shouldn't be quite as afraid as people are today. It's unbelievable, right? Like a city, a third of the people in the city would be wiped out, okay? It's amazing. Right? Forget about 2 weeks. They get it like 3 days a day, okay? So that'll give you a little perspective so you're not going up and down like a roller coaster with everything that you're seeing on your smartphone. You have perspective. You can step back. It also means that you can, again, I keep using the word conversation, I like to use the word wrestle. That you've read these great books, okay, and you've learned to respect them because they have survived the ravages of time and they deal with enduring issues, but you've also learned that while you need to respect them and learn them, you can question them. Okay? You don't have to go to either extreme of saying if it's old, it must be true, but you also don't fall into the trap of saying it's old and therefore it must be wrong and outdated. Did any of you learn a C.S. Lewis phrase, chronological snobbery? Did that come up in any of your classes? Okay. Lewis actually learned it from a guy named Owen Barfield, and it was one of the things that led Lewis to fame. This chronological snobbery is this idea that because something is old, it must be outdated. Or because people no longer believe something, it must have been disproven. That's another reason I wrote Atheism on Trial. Nobody actually ever disproved miracles. There was this really annoying fellow named David Hume, and he's kind of the person for what the word jerk was invented, right? Who thought that he disproved miracles in one silly chapter. He didn't, right? But people keep pointing back to him like he disproved it, right? No, you need to be able to go back and say, were these things ever really disproven? Or did we just stop believing in them? You can go back and be more objective. You can wrestle with it, right? You can shape your mind against the sort of give and take of what is going on. Another thing that I see, because I'm teaching students from every different background, but especially when I get students that were classically trained, they're able to move beyond the surface, right? You might get a regular student and they might write an essay on the Odyssey or whatever, and they might do a very good job telling you the plot and telling you Odysseus does this and then Odysseus does that, but they resist real analysis. Like, why does Odysseus make the choices that he does? What are his motivations? What is the thematic message that Homer is trying to teach us? They don't want to do that because that's scary and it takes risk. And it's better to just give you the plot summary. But you all are learning to engage with the books you read. Not to read passively, but to learn to read and take your pen and mark up the words. Did I have to do that too? Do they have their own books? Something, so, don't mark up a book that's not yours. But please remember, I wasted a lot of time in undergrad because I was too much of a good boy, and I didn't write my books because I thought that was bad. And of course, what I did is I wasted a lot of time because what are you going to remember, right? So once the book is yours, learn to write in the margin, learn to mark it up, to search. Oh, Ty, tell me they read, what's the name? How to Read a Book?
Yes, seventh grade did.
Yes, you read that? I just forgot the other thing.
Yeah.
We're around. Who, by the way, became a Christian, partly by reading and engaging with all these things. Like that other great guy who wrote The Conservative Mind. You know what I'm talking about? The Roots of American Order. The guy from Hillsdale. What am I hearing? Okay, but a lot of these people, by studying these things, were actually brought to a fuller. We're all waiting for Jordan Peterson to become a Christian any day, okay? Because he's reading the right stuff, and he's asking the right questions, and he's wrestling in the right way. Right? And again, this is wonderful because there was a period, especially for evangelicals, when there was a person named Mark Noll who wrote a book called The Scandal of the Evangelical Mind. And I read that when I was in college, and it had a big influence on me. And his answer was, the scandal of the evangelical mind is that there isn't one, okay? What he was saying was, too many evangelical Protestants were just about blind faith, and they didn't want to think, and they didn't want to reason and grow. That's not the case now, okay? It's actually flip-flop. At the very time when the universities that used to be great are shutting down dialogue, what they call cancel culture, at the same moment that's happening, it is sometimes the most conservative of Christians that are willing to engage and discuss and wrestle with. Have you read the Brothers Karamazov? That lady teaches you over there? Okay. Should we read the whole thing? Look at that. Oh, man. I don't think that was a hobble, but that was like, oh my gosh. And by the way, don't take that book and hit you with yourself because you might get brain damage. But she could have made some War and Peace, that's even longer. Or Les Mis, which is like the full version is like 1,300 pages or something. Okay? Because the guy goes on and on and on and on and on. But again, you're wrestling with things. Okay? Now, let me use an example. Some of you read the Brothers Karamazov. Okay? I'm sorry if I'm going to give you a spoiler here. Okay? Oh, it's spoiler. It's kind of hard. Okay? Okay, well, do they read Crime and Punishment? Okay, that's also by Dostoevsky. And Crime and Punishment it's actually a critique of the Nietzschean Superman before Nietzsche actually used that phrase, okay? The Nietzschean Superman is the idea that, okay, you heard the name Superman, but I'm not talking, by the way, are you all going to go home this weekend and watch the Zack Snyder cut, okay? If you have HBO Max, when I get home, apparently on HBO Max is like the 4-hour original Zack Snyder cut of the, what they call the Justice League. You go into that crazy stuff? Like they got mad, so they threw out and brought Josh Whedon in to finish it or something, so we'll see. But it's apparently 4 hours long, so are you going to watch it? They're going to watch it. The Justice League. The new Wonder Woman was really, really disappointing. You see the new one? 1984 or whatever? Gosh, I was in college, 1984. Okay, the Nietzschean Superman says that what we need, what Nietzsche called for, is someone that will have the courage to rise above middle-class morality, as Henry P. Dugu calls it, to rise above middle-class morality and exert our will to power. We need to move beyond good and evil and throw off the shackles of what they call bourgeois morality, middle-class morality. Well, in this book, The crime and punishment. There is a guy named Raskolnikov who's a would-be hero. He thinks, I'm above morality, I'm a special person, I don't need to be bound to these things that were man-made, he thinks. And he thinks I can do whatever. And so he just almost arbitrarily bludgeons his landlady to death. Right? And the rest of the novel is about the policeman, the detective, who slowly tracks him down, and he slowly realizes he is a moral, ethical creature, and that we need those strictures, and that if we move beyond them, we will destroy them. And I won't give it away, but I'll tell you that the Brothers Karamazov shows you that ideas have consequences. Let me tell you a new study that was done that was incredibly important. They did a study and they only looked at white people in America, right? And they looked at the rich white all the way down to the poor white. So look at those people that live up in the Adirondacks in Kentucky and Tennessee, okay? They went the whole gamut. And what they showed was amazing. They showed that the progressive people, the rich progressive people on the top, who have been peddling all this breakdown of the nuclear family, breakdown of morality, breakdown of sexual ethics, what they discovered is that they don't live by that. They actually are following the rules, having a husband and wife, having children, all of this and they're doing well. But they are destroying the poor whites, who, this is important because it takes out the racial element, which is only looking at white people, and showing that they are giving them something that is destroying their families and destroying them. So, you will understand because of what you've done, read, that ideas have consequences, okay? Hopefully you've studied the downfall of the Athenian democracy and saw what happened if you read Thucydides. Everything you need to know about political science is in Thucydides, okay? And you read other stuff, but it's all there. It shows what happens when language gets corrupted, when we stop following higher morality and start giving them what's called expediency. It's often called Machiavellianism today. The ends justify the means, and it shows what happens. Oh, I think am I out of time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we have time for questions or probably not?
A minute or two.
Okay, we have time for one or two. Anybody have a thought, question you want to throw out there? He's thinking about it. He's sitting there. The teachers can ask a question if they want. There's something you want me to tell the students and the teachers?
What advice would you give them if they're looking at college? What advice?
Okay, first of all, it's really cool to be able to go to a university that's got a big name, but this really means less and less. Okay, you understand the reason why people that go to Harvard and Princeton and Yale often end up making a lot of money is because they've already have a lot of money when they go, okay? So we just need to understand that this is a little elite club, okay? And they don't, okay? We teachers all know that sometimes we're lucky enough to get a class where everybody can write well. And then sometimes we get a class where nobody seems able to write well. And we do the best that we can, okay? But look for a college that is going to continue the education that you did here, okay? One that actually believes in the liberal arts. Now, I don't know, some of you may want to take a year off and work and learn about life, okay? But if you feel like you've grown here, find some place that, not just HBU, some of the good schools that really believe in this are Hillsdale College, Grove City, Patrick Henry. Liberty's been having some problems, but they're still good, okay? And it's had a lot of problems lately. But there are still a lot of good schools out there that you can go to and continue this. And also, let me just say, okay, that this idea that you can't get a job if you major in the humanities is just not true. If you just Google it and look. Google business jobs for humanities majors. And you will find that businesses are hungry for humanities majors. Why? Because there are people who can think critically, they can think outside the box, they can be flexible and move and change, they have the kind of social skills, right? They're looking for people like really, okay? There is almost no difference between this $150 phone and the $1,000 plus iPhone. The only difference is it doesn't have a thumbprint, on it, right? Well, that's not going to kill me, cut off my finger and put it on there, okay? So just like, but what I'm saying is there is no difference. That's why they need humanities majors to convince people that there is a difference in that $1,000 iPhone. I hate to say that without telling you to become a sophist, I guess, but basically, they're looking for people that can understand the way people think and the way they react to things. And so they're looking, because most people end up working in an office of some kind. They want people that have the social skills that can interact and talk about various subjects that aren't so narrowly focused, they don't know anything. They don't want to hire somebody and then have to tell you every single thing to do. They want someone that is self-motivated. And guess what? When you look at the statistics, classical Christian schools, you all are much, much more likely to actually continue reading books after you graduate. Okay? Most people just don't. They just stop. They just read stuff on their phone. To actually read a book. So major in something you love. Let it shape your mind. Okay? Because almost any job in the business sector, they're going to teach you what you now. Look, if you're called to be a nurse, you do need to go to nursing school. Okay? There are a few things where it's very, very specific. Okay? But if you're thinking, well, I want to be a lawyer, you can major in anything you want. You don't have to major in pre-law. Okay? Even medicine. You know, you can major in biology and then take some kind of philosophy on the side or something. But don't bind yourself in and don't allow yourself to be terrorized, right? Because nobody even knows what the business market is going to look like 5 years from now. All the jobs are changing. What was somebody was saying to me the other day? That one of the most secure jobs used to be, I'm going to be a CPA, a certified public. People say, pretty soon, that business, that job may not even exist because it's all done by computers and stuff. So things that seem, you've all heard about a place called in New York, Rochester, New York. You know what Rochester, New York was the home of? It was the home of Kodak. Do you know what Kodak is? Okay? They're the ones that used to make that little roll of film that you put in there, a picture, and you sent it in. And those people thought they would do that for the end. And then the cell phone came out with pictures. And by the way, do any of you print out the pictures you take? Some people, there's a few. Because you know, the cloud's going to go down, and we're going to lose an entire generation of pictures. Which is, so it will be like it never existed. Which might be good, because I still have stuff I can embarrass my son with. You know, the pictures I took, and you know, I do it like that. I had it on the paper. Anyway, pushes like that. You know, when it was so big, I had to put a VHS tape into it. It's a big. Is that one of those? Oh yeah, and I carry that all over the place. Oh my God, it's crazy stuff. But again, don't be nervous. Don't let people think, oh, if you don't make sure this is you're not going to have a job. Okay? Do you know that most Americans now will change their career 3 times? But that's just their job, but their career. What if they change your career? Like I said, only if it's something specific. Like I said, if you really feel called to be a nurse, you need to go to nursing school, okay? Or a specific kind of engineering. There are certainly, but you know what? You can go to schools now, like my school, at HBU. You have a liberal arts core that will give you the very stuff you're doing here on a higher level. And you can major in engineering or business. We even have an honors college now. It's a 3-year program. It takes the place of the regular liberal arts core. And you read a mountain of books, and you spend 4 hours a week doing Socratic dialogue. Any of you like that? You do that in class? You like doing that? And if you're terrified about that, then maybe just do the regular books. Okay? But if you really like this, and you're basically getting a great books degree, but you're also majoring in whatever you want. Like I said, it could be nursing, it could be nursing program. But so think about that, but don't be anxious. Like I said, you're better. You seem less anxious. Maybe you're not always on your phone. At least during the day. I think when you get home, okay? But you should be less anxious because you have some understanding of history, okay? You understand that this too shall pass, okay? Because you've seen it. You understand that there's nothing new under the sun. So, again, I don't want to put too much pressure on you all, but this is the salt and light right now, okay? Our country is going a little bit crazy, okay? And it needs a stabilizing force. It needs the force of people who have read the same books that our founding fathers made to create this culture, to understand what democracy means, to understand what it means to be made in God's image but fallen, to understand what it means to believe in absolute goodness, truth, and beauty, like good with a capital G and truth with a capital T. Less and less people understand that, okay? to understand responsibility, okay? To understand that we don't own our bodies, okay? Our bodies were a gift, and we are stewards of those, right? And we're responsible to be stewards of our resources, of our chances to go to college, of our own body, okay? I mean, you're seeing your own generation. They don't even know. Simple. What Jesus, it says in the Bible, male and female created he them. And Jesus repeats that. Male and female created he them. They understand that we are not souls trapped in a body, but we are in flesh souls, okay? So it's not just our body that's masculine, our soul is masculine within, okay? And you can't just simply tear them apart, right? Our body, I'm getting late here, but there are a lot of people. There's a great guy named G.K. Chesterton who said, I don't understand it. All these people used to say, I don't like why these Christians say that the body is bad and flesh is bad. And another thing I hate about Christians is that they persecuted those poor, nice Gnostics. Yeah, that's kind of a cerebral joke there, okay? Because the church is the one that says the body and flesh are good. We're fallen, but we are good. That's why we believe that God took our flesh. The Gnostics did not believe that Jesus was fully man and fully God because they believed that flesh was inherently bad and sinful, and therefore it couldn't have happened. Right? So you need to understand that Christianity says that the body is good, and the soul is good, and they were created by God, but they're fallen, but they can be redeemed. And you do understand when we get to heaven, you do understand they're not going to be an angel in heaven. Did you know that? How many of you love the movie It's a Wonderful Life? One of my top 10 favorite movies, but very bad theology about angels, okay? God created angels. They're a whole different thing, okay? In heaven, after the end of the world, whatever that is, it could be tomorrow, the end of the world, in heaven, we will have resurrection bodies. We will continue to be fully physical and fully spiritual. Right? So it's important what we do with our body. Okay? A lot of people don't know that anymore. They've forgotten that. You know it. You've read it. You understand it. You've read Augustine and Aquinas and all that stuff. And done it. I'm running out of time. But anyway, like I said, we'll come back out here again. But hold in there. Sometimes the classwork is hard, but it's worth it. Okay? It's setting you on a good sort of arc, okay, as you move along, and you will be ahead of other people. Not in a snooty way, but you'll be above people because you'll be more integrated, understanding yourself, understanding goodness, truth, and beauty, and actually more flexible because of what you've done. Well, thanks. It's good to see you all.